All right, I'm just going to check that my closed captions are working, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome back to Return of the Obra Dinn. I, as always, am Cello, CEL10E, and we are back to our 1-bit mystery game, Return of the Obra Dinn. Last time that we played this was about a week ago, so to refresh everyone's memory, this is an indie game that was released last year by solo developer Lucas Pope. It is a game in an old 1-bit style where there is either light or dark, and everything is sort of pixelated in that way. The game is actually made with 3D modeling and, much more advanced techniques than those games, but it harkens back to that graphical style with that color palette, which is really cool. So I have mine set with the dark color as a rich chocolate brown, and the light color is a light yellow. That is the color palette, let me check here, of the Zenith ZVM 1240. That is the old machine that it resembles. So I'm going to go ahead and load up our save here. Although I hate stopping the menu music, it's such a catchy theme. So the setup of Return of the Obra Dinn is that we are playing an insurance investigator who has been sent out to the ship Obra Dinn, which set out for a voyage around Africa eastward from Britain, and returned mysteriously a couple years later with no crew aboard, and with the ship, at least the sails, in ruins. And so we are here to determine what happened to all 60 of the people who left England on that ship when it left port. We were given so as well as our insurance job, we've also been given a task by a mysterious man named Henry Evans. He has sent us a book, which is a journal detailing the voyage of the Obra Dinn, but all of the pages were blank. All we had were chapter titles and an image and a list of everyone on board. Henry Evans wrote to us, "I trust that you now find yourself aboard the Obra Dinn. I expected this day to come, and my every intention was to tell the ship's strange tale within the pages of this book. Regrettably, failing health has allowed me to produce only the basic outline that follows. Your presence on the Obra Dinn is critical. I leave the discovery of its fate and the completion of this book in your hands. The next few pages will seem bewildering at first. All will make sense in time. Use the pocket watch to determine the identity and fate of everyone aboard. Complete each chapter accurately, and return the book by guaranteed post to the French Office of Affairs in Morocco. The bargain chapter will remain unknown to you. I possess the details within, but have elected to keep them private for now. Signed, Henry Evans." We don't know who he is. Maybe he was aboard the ship. He must have been, if he could write it all down. And so we have our table of contents with all 10 chapters, a map of the projected journey, a floor plan of the 4 decks of the ship, a list of everyone aboard. There were 60 in total, and a series of 3 sketches, which between them include everyone on the crew, that we can use to identify people by their face, because, most notably, Henry Evans, along with this book, gave us a magical pocket watch, which, when we find a corpse on board, such as I've just walked over now, there is a corpse, skeleton in a dark jacket, lying in front of the entrance to the captain's and passengers' quarters. When we approach a corpse, our pocket watch will activate, and we will be taken back in time to a snapshot of the moment of that individual's death. So, last time we looked at this death, which precipitated the end chapter, the 10th chapter of the book. We looked at that entire chapter, and then we started on another one. So just for a recap here, I'm going to quick go through the scenes of the end, and then we'll get to the chapter we're working on today. So this is going to be 10, part 1.
Captain! Open the door! Kick it in. Lest we break it down and take more than those shells!
You bastards may take exactly what I give you!
So when we open the scene, we're standing in the doorway where we found the corpse, looking forward down the hallway at a man who's just fired a gun. This door has just been kicked open, and the bullet path in the air is represented with a spray of particles. If we move to turn around, we see that the man who's just been shot is wearing an officer's jacket, a dark jacket with bright buttons. He is shirtless under the jacket and is holding a hatchet in his right hand. He is starting to fall backwards from the force of the bullet. Behind his right shoulder is another man, not in any sort of official uniform, just in a loose shirt with a scarf. He's also wearing a knit cap on his head, and he is sort of rearing back in fear as this man has just been shot. The shooter, if we approach him, is shirtless. He has long hair, dark, slicked back, dark eyebrows. His face is stern, and he has a thick, dark mustache. Outside, and this is something that we didn't see until a second viewing of the scene, there is a fourth man in this scene. Another person not identifiable by any sort of rank or dress, but another crew member in a loose shirt, bald with a white beard, who is running up the stairs to the side, up to the top deck, and is carrying a knife in his teeth. You'll notice that the music for this scene has stopped. The music assigned to each scene is exactly 1 minute long. And last time I streamed, I wrote for myself 1 minute long descriptions so that I could fit it in. But I haven't done that this time, so we'll see whether I make it fit with the new scenes. With the new scenes, you only get that 1 minute to look at it before having to go look at the book. So that's this scene. We've heard a man with a Scottish accent, we've heard another man, and we've heard the voice of who presumably is the captain, the shooter from inside this room. Some sort of mutiny has taken place. At the back of the scene, as it sort of fades into white with the rest of the ship's deck obscured with white fog, there's a doorway that allows us to leave. So I'm going to go ahead and exit. For that scene, we get a page in the book telling us that it happened outside the captain's quarters. We have a transcript of the scene which marks the lines spoken by the victim. So we can identify that the person speaking with a Scottish accent is the one who died. We also have a version of the sketch, the crew sketch, with only the people who were present lit up. Everyone else is hidden in gray, so we can see exactly who was here. And we have the deck map with the location of the corpse marked, if we ever want to find it again, like I just have. That allowed us Seeing that scene allowed us to go into the captain's quarters, because one of the great features of this magical pocket watch is that anytime you see a door or a stairway open in a memory, it will open for you in real life, which is extremely convenient. So we came in here and saw a second body on the floor.
Where are they? Must be in here someplace.
They're at the bottom of the sea.
That's a lie.
The scene here is we're standing in the captain's quarters, which is a large room. Much of the furniture has been overturned, and we're positioned at the shoulder of the man with the knit hat. He's moved in here, he's holding a wooden stick in his right hand, and his face is scrunched up in pain because the captain, who's standing in front of him, has just swung a knife and cut his throat. Blood is beginning to gush and follows the arc of the knife upward into the air. We can also see that the pistol has been dropped on the ground, which the captain used to shoot in the previous scene, and the man who was shot is lying motionless back out in the hallway with his hatchet on the ground beside him. If we go further out, we can see that the man who was climbing the stairs is now nowhere to be seen on the top deck. We actually have to find him by going back inside the captain's quarters and around to a little front deck that he has. A walk around the front of the ship, and we can see that the bald man with the knife is jumping down over I guess this is the stern of the ship, not the front. Jumping down over the back of the ship towards the railing of this little landing, attempting to sneak his way in from the back. So I'm going to go ahead and exit this scene, and then we'll look at the book. We don't know the identity of this person. We actually didn't know the identity of the previous person at the time, although we identified him later. So Knit Hat Man, we were able to determine that he was knifed. He was killed by the captain, whose name is Robert Witterell. We deduced that, well, not deduced, the information was available to us on the crew list. We knew that that was the captain's name. So we have unmistakably put the captain's face to his name. We know that he's the man with the long dark hair, thick eyebrows, thick mustache, very stern, and apparently not a fan of crew mutiny. Going further into the room than Hatman's skeleton, we see a third skeleton. This will be Chapter 10, Part 3. A scene without words, as it were. So we are now in that far corner of the captain's room, near his back door, and we're at the shoulder of the man, the bald man who had the knife. He is falling backwards because he's just been hit directly in the forehead by the wooden stick that the man with the hat had been carrying, which the captain has now picked up. The knife that the bald man had is wedged in the captain's side. He did manage to stab him right below his ribs on his right side. It looks like the captain has swung himself off balance with this hit to the forehead and is collapsing forward to his knees. The man whose throat was cut, the Knit Hat Man, I'm sorry for all the epithets, we don't know their names, is clutching at his throat as he bleeds out on the ground. And so now we have only one man alive at this point, just the captain. We don't know whether there's anyone else alive on the ship, but since this is chapter 10, the end, I expect there may not be. I'm gonna go ahead and leave this scene and take a look at the book. So again, we don't know this crew member's name, and we also know that we cannot know his name because the portrait of him that we see, which is a close-up of his position in the sketch, is blurry. All of the lines are fuzzy, like it's sand that's been spread out. And so that means that the game knows that we do not have the information to deduce the identity of this man. So that's a comfort. We don't know and we can't know. But we do know that he was clubbed by Captain Robert Witterell. And then, in that scene, the door to the back room was open, the bedroom attached to these quarters. And in there, on the floor, we see a fourth corpse. Well, skeleton. It's been far too long to call this a corpse. Chapter 10, Part 4, the last scene in the book.
Abigail, your brother, my friend, I shot him dead. I'll be with you soon, my love. Please forgive me for everything.
So, we are now in this side bedroom, and the captain has made it in here from where he just clubbed the man with the knife. There are blood drops on the floor from his knife wound. He's sitting in a chair with his elbows on his knees, very resigned. And he has his pistol back and has just shot himself through the face. A spray of gunfire particles and a spray of blood are obscuring most of his face, so we can't actually see the wound. Even stylized as it is, that's quite a lot. Elsewhere in this room, we see a corpse in the bed who may actually be the aforementioned Abigail. We don't know how long she's been dead, but it is a woman with dark hair who has been laid to rest in the bed and not buried. So, we know that the book ends with a suicide. Not a great fate for the good ship Obra Dinn, which I think was like a cargo ship. I don't know what its job was, but it wasn't that. So we were able to determine, and this was our first scene where we were able to determine the culprit, the method of death, and the victim, because we know it was Captain Robert Witterell's suicide. We also got a ton of information from his little monologue there at the end. We know that the woman in the bed is Abigail. Oh, we can presume that. And we know that somebody that the captain shot was her brother. So this took us down a rabbit hole into the crew list, looking for Abigail and looking for a man who might be her brother. I'm just going to go ahead and open the crew list here. So Abigail, so all of the passengers and crew here are listed by their rank. So the captain is first, then the first, second, third, and fourth mates, then the other primary staff, then the passengers, then, let's see, then the stewards, then the midshipmen, topmen, and seamen of the crew. So among the passengers, was a woman named Abigail Hoskett Witterell. Very convenient for us that she kept her maiden name as her middle name. So we know that she was from Scotland originally. And if we look for a Scottish crew member with the last name Hoskett, we find William Hoskett from Scotland, the first mate. So with that in mind, we were able to go back to the first man that died, because we did notice that he was wearing an officer's jacket, and we were able to identify him as William Hoskett, first mate. And then we had to figure out how Abigail died. So now we're going backwards into the story to a different chapter, specifically chapter 7, The Doom. And by looking at Abigail's skeleton in the present day, we got this. And we see quite a scene above board. This is a much more complicated scene than we saw in any of the previous deaths. So Abigail is standing on the top deck of the ship above board, and she's just been hit with a falling beam, a mast, or a piece of, some beam that was up in the rigging. And so that is crushing her, and she's falling to the ground. Next to her is the man that she must have been talking to, Martin. He is falling, losing his balance, falling forward. He was holding some sort of military sword, and that is dropping from his hand. All around us there is a heavy, pelting rain falling, and giant waves are crashing over the side of the ship. There are other crew members on deck. There's someone with 2 other women standing near the passenger cabins. There's some officer on the floor, fallen down but holding 2 pistols and shooting. There are a couple of crew members towards the front of the deck. One is hauling the corpse of somebody, and 2 others are fighting, because this is not just a storm. This is an attack. There is some sort of tentacled beast, some sort of kraken attacking the ship here. And that is something that is honestly, it's so obvious that it's hard to notice the first time you look at this scene, that there's just tentacles everywhere, because this scene is so busy. There's so much water, there's so much rain. The deck is so huge, there's waves and people everywhere. And the first time I played, it took me a good, second viewing to actually see what was wielding the beam that crushed Abigail. It was one of the giant tentacles here. And so we've learned suddenly that this ship did not fall to mutiny or to any ordinary thing that befalls a ship in the mid-1800s. There is some sinister force at work here. And so once we deduced that Abigail died, being crushed by falling rigging, for one thing, the game confirmed it for us and typeset it in the book, because once you get 3 scenes right, once you get 3 fates right, it will typeset them for you and confirm them all at the same time. So we got Abigail right, we got her brother William Hoskett, the first mate, right, and we got the captain right. So those 3 are all confirmed for us. And then we were presented with a new way of discovering deaths, because elsewhere in this scene there is another corpse that no longer exists in the present day. There's the corpse of a crew member who we were not able to see on deck anymore. So we were able to go to a scene within a scene here, so to speak, and view his story. This is another one without any words, but we are, in this scene, we are looking directly upwards into the air with heavy rain falling all around, and we're seeing an enormous tentacle wrapped around the torso of this man who is shirtless. He has visible spiral tattoos all over his chest and face, and the tentacle is holding him upside down in the air, squeezing the life out of him. His right arm is free. It looks like he had a sword at one point, which is now stabbed further down the tentacle. If we look around this scene some more, we see that nearby there is a bald crew member with a striped shirt who's holding a wooden spear, sort of tentatively pointing it upwards. There is a crew member with a ponytail and beard nearby who is throwing something at the tentacle, throwing a spear maybe. Somebody has fallen down and is gripping one of the, I think this is a rope turning mechanism on deck. There's another corpse lying in a pool of blood. Somebody's taking shelter with a gun. There's an officer throwing guns to another officer. Let's see, who else is up here? Somebody is steadying himself near the mast, trying to get a good shot. Most of these guns are rifles, by the way. A couple of people have had pistols, but for the majority, these are rifles. I see one person carrying what looks like it might be a bag of gunpowder. And in the distance, we see that there is a lifeboat that must have been escaping, which has been thrown into the air by the Kraken, and 3 people are falling out of it. So we'll have to identify them at some point, probably. It seems like they are probably no longer living after this scene, even though they're not the individual that we know is dying. Yeah, so we were not able to identify this man, although the game has told us that with a difficult deduction, we might be able to. It has rated this 2 out of 3 stars for difficulty. So I think that is based on the tattooing that is on this person's body, that if you were able to tie that to a particular culture and look at the national origins of the people on the ship, you might be able to make a conclusion. I have never been able to do that in this game. Even though I've played it a few times, I still can't conclusively say that from this early on I would be able to tie that to any particular culture. They're very spirally, and the ones on the face are at a low enough resolution with the sort of 1-bit pixel art that I can't see them. In my first playthrough, I thought for most of the time that it was Celtic spirals, and then I was proven wrong at the end. So spoiler alert, this man is not Celtic. But it remains to be seen what exactly, is his origin. Then we were led to another scene within this scene. There is a body on deck here. So we are moving, and I should mention, we are moving progressively backward in time. So Abigail's death was part 8 of the Doom, the last part of chapter 7. This death, being torn apart by the beast, is part 7. And the scene we're about to look at is part 6. Alright, so for this scene, we are, again, looking directly upwards into the sky. There is an enormous explosion that is filling the entire field of view, and within it is the silhouette of a crew member who has been caught directly in the center of the blast. There's a rope stretching from him back to the deck, where one of his fellow crewmates is holding on and shielding his face from the light. The deck of the ship is severely tilted in this scene, a very steep angle towards the side where this explosion has taken place. It looks like the Kraken may be pulling the ship to its side, or it's gone on over a wave, or a combination of the two. Further towards the front, there is our tattooed man with his sword, who has just come up from below deck. And also coming up from below deck are the two officers that we saw throwing guns to each other, one of whom is carrying a bunch of guns but has just lost his balance and is falling backward down the stairs. And more tentacles are attacking the front and the not the other side of the ship in this scene, just the left side and the front. And we were not able to identify this crew member either, although we did obviously identify their cause of death. Notably, none of the dialogue spoken in that scene was by this individual. It was all by the same speaker who was not this person, which is a curiosity, so we can't even identify him by his voice, unfortunately. And then we were out of the string of scene within scene within scene. Oh, I just noticed off the right side of the ship there's somebody falling. Must have fell off the rigging when the ship tilted. Is falling overboard. We'll have to identify that later. Alright. So we're done with the scene within a scene within a scene. We can go ahead and leave. But crucially, within that memory, we saw the stairs to below deck open. And because of our magic door opening pocket watch, we can go towards the front of the ship now. And the front stairs down to the second deck of the ship are now open. So this is the gun deck of the ship. Appropriately, this is where the cannons are kept. So the front half of the ship on this deck is the cannons, and the back half is where the first through fourth mates cabins are, the bosun and the bosun mates cabins. I keep saying captains. Cabins, and the midshipmen and the stewards also have cabins on this deck. The top deck is the captain and the passengers. So, down on the gun deck, we see most of the cannon still strapped in, pointed out their portholes, but moving slightly farther back in the ship, we see evidence of chaos. Some furniture has been broken and overturned, and one of the cannon is completely fallen over on its side, with the gun is detached from the little cart that carries it. Another cannon is completely fallen over. The wall is splintered from where the cannon has fallen into it, and under the barrel of the cannon we see a body. This will be our first new scene this week. This will be... Let me do my key shortcuts right. 7 part 5.
Sir, loose cannon! This is nearly over! Hold your flag!
And so we see that this aforementioned loose cannon has crushed a crew member into the middle wall of this deck. Behind him, farther towards the stern of the ship, is an officer clambering over crates and chests that are falling and tipping as the ship is. there is a man with the thing that you use to tamp down the powder as you load a cannon, who is looking back towards them in shock. He is standing over a body on the floor. There's somebody else who's been crushed under a different cannon. That must have happened previously. That's a cannon closer to the windows. That's all the time we have to look at this scene. That's our 1 minute. Chapter 7, Part 5, On the Gun Deck. Who is this? How did they die? Well, the picture is blurred, so we definitely don't know who this is yet. I'm going to look at the transcript and see if they were the ones speaking at any point. And yes, so the man speaking here is the man who said, "Sir, loose cannon." And that was definitely a non-England accent there. So we'll have to look out for a crew member not from England when we identify them. Notably, although I didn't recognize him in the scene, the officer clambering over the chests is the man we've already identified as Martin. Martin is the third mate, Martin Parrott, who must have been below deck at this point. There are also other crew members in this scene, one of whom is the man that in the next scene explodes in the blast, and another crew member with him. I noticed but didn't get the time to say it that those two men are running up the stairs towards the top deck with bags of gunpowder in hand, which must lead to the ill-fated explosion. This music we're hearing here, this sort of trembly music, is what indicates that there's another corpse somewhere in this scene that I need to go look at. So I'm going to activate the pocket watch, which turns the entire world dark with really dark silhouette outlines, and only highlights the body that I'm supposed to be going to look at, which is the other one near the window that the man with the tamping stick was standing near. So we will investigate this. What this is going to do is send us back to the present day, but the watch, which is now rattling when we activate it here, is going to send a white cloud of smoke traveling around the ship and landing in the place where that body used to be, outlining it in a sort of fuzzy smoke so we can look at it as if it were a present-day corpse. And we're going back to 7 and 4. The fuse is all we heard there, and we have a terrible scene where a cannon, which has been pulled by the Kraken to, instead of facing out the window, face parallel to the wall of the ship. So it's shooting down the length of the ship inside, and has caught a man in its blast, being shot towards the inner wall, separating us from the next cabin. His head has been completely blown off in the blast, and his body is, pardon my term, ragdolling in the air. Let's see, who else is in this scene? Further back, we see men manning the other cannons, which are falling because of this Kraken attack. The one that will go loose in the next scene is about to start rolling backwards. We see our man with the tattoos is here, and a couple of other crew members. Chapter 7, Part 4. And it is telling us that there were actually 2 deaths in this scene. So there must have been a second man hit by the explosion, who we just haven't found. Looking at the transcript, The words "the fuse" were spoken by the man who died. And I believe that was a Central European accent, maybe German or Austrian. So we'll have to look out for that. Also in this scene, let's see if I recognize any of the other crew members. Oh, our knit hat man from the end is here. As well as our knife teeth man and our tattoo man. They're all, well, have been manning the cannons back here and are now falling over because of the Kraken disrupting things through the windows. And we have the shaky watch again, telling us there's another body to look at. I neglected to mention that somebody had already been crushed under a cannon previously. So there is a body hidden under some wreckage here. So the watch will take us back to the present day, where we will let the white cloud make its leisurely way over about 2 meters to this fallen cannon. Let's go ahead and look. I'm gonna guess this is gonna be, as we're moving backwards in time, probably 7 part 3. Yes, 7-3. Indeed. So this is directly before we see this same cannon. This is probably just seconds before part 4 that we just saw. This cannon is being pulled by the Kraken parallel to the wall against it, and 2 men are at the front being lashed to it by the tentacle, and 1 man is behind it being crushed against the wall. These 2 men are the men that we have identified as having died in the following scene, one of whom in the sketch is standing near a firing squad giving orders, so he may be the chief gunner. We'll have to look. The man behind him, I don't recognize. He's a man with a balding head, hair around the ears and back of his head that we don't know. Chapter 7, Part 3. Who is this? How did they die? We don't know who this is. Many of these crew members, we have no idea who they are. His picture is blurred out, and the game has told us we cannot know who this is, so that's reassuring. I'm going to check the transcript, and none of it was said by him. All of it was said by the same individual, so all of those orders being given, load, move by hands, etc., were all being given by the same person. I'm going to go ahead and look at our sketch here. So we have 5 crew members from the top portion of the sketch. Our knife teeth man is in this scene, tattoo man is in this scene, the guy with the ponytail and beard is in this scene. This guy who's dying, who we haven't seen before, because everything we've seen has been after this when he's been dead. And the guy with the bald, male pattern baldness, as well as Knit Cap Man, who's in the bottom picture, and this guy giving orders. Now, I guess I'm not allowed to make conjectures based on his hat, his fancy hat alone, because his picture is blurred out. So we're not allowed to guess that this may be the chief gunner. Oh well, we'll get him sometime. So I'm just going to go ahead and look around the rest of this scene. There is an intermediate wall separating this portion of the gun deck from the next, where the other men have been working. However, in the following scenes, it has been smashed through by this loose cannon, or rather, Kraken-wielded cannon. And so we didn't know there was a wall there before. But the other 4 crew members, knife teeth, knit hat, tattoos, and ponytail, are back here. All sort of falling over thanks to the Kraken grabbing a cannon and presumably pulling the ship over with it. And we do not have Shaky Watch, which means there must not be another death to look at here. So I will look for the door out of this scene. Wandering around this gun deck is a little bit difficult because there's overturned furniture everywhere. There's a bunch of barrels on the floor. There's some benches upside down. There's guns on the other side of the ship which aren't being used at all. Oh, there it is. I have to walk back towards the quarters to find the door. There we go. So, we haven't seen part 2 or part 1 of the Doom. We weren't led to them. And now we've sort of reached the open exploration portion. We have access to the top deck and the gun deck. I do see that the stairwell at the other end of the deck might be open as well. Oh no, it's not. The the roof separating the stairs at the other end of the deck has not been opened, so we can only go up and down on the front side of the ship, not the stern side. I keep forgetting what the front of a ship is called. The bow? The bow. So we have a corpse here that's been crushed by a cannon. That was what led us to the gun scenes. If we go further forward, let's see. It looks like this is the small kitchen area of the ship. On the front part of the gun deck here, I see a cabinet with some dishes in it, some of which have fallen out. I see a stool strapped to a post, tied up. And there's sort of a counter island here for preparation or eating. And a door around to the front, where the masthead? The prow of the ship. There's a door open with the fuzzy sort of watch opening lines that say that the watch has opened this door. So I'm gonna go see what's out here. Well, the prow of the ship is out here. There's not a particular figurehead on the Obra Dinn that I can tell. And there is a corpse out here. Which is wild. So let's see what happened here. Also notably, next to the corpse, one of the supports of the little railing out here is broken. So let's see. Because I know that I have played this game before and I know what's coming up in this scene, warning for, content warning for audio of gross bodily function coming up. Here we go. Keep zooming instead of activating. I really should have said warning for just gross sounds in general. So what we're seeing here, we are out on this prow of the ship. It is night instead of day, and a man who was out here to relieve himself has been caught by the tentacle of the Kraken and is being squished against the railing, being strangled. If we turn around and go backwards into the ship, the door is open and we can see that there are some people here. There's one man who seems to be serving food on the kitchen island and is looking in concern towards the front. Further back, I see there are hammocks strung above the cannons, which means that this must be where some of the men sleep. The ship seems to be at rest. It does not seem to know that there is a kraken. This must be before the other events of the Doom. Ah, indeed. This is the Doom Part 2. Who is this? How did they die? And the identity of this man has been given away immediately to us because his position in the sketch is not, he's not in the sketch. He is the one who signed the sketch. So his illustration here is the initials ES. So I'm going to go ahead and look for an ES who might be, let's say, an artist. So yes, on the crew list, crew member number 18 is Edward Spratt, artist, a passenger from England. And we know the fate. We now know the fate of Edward Spratt, the artist. He was, well, what do I even say that? Strangled? Strangled really has more to do with the neck. Crushed by a beast. Edward Spratt, artist, was crushed by a terrible beast. And the game will not confirm this for us until we have 3 total things correct at a time. We can see from the sketch here that 13 other individuals were present in the scene. So this may be something we need to go back to look at who was here, who was alive, and what they might have been doing at the time. And we have Shaky Watch. There's a death somewhere here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and look at the scene a little more before we move on, because we haven't really explored this thoroughly. So I see a bunch of boots in beds. They're covered by blankets when they're lying down, but I can see some boots sticking out. There's 2 men eating dinner at a table that's been set up between 2 of the cannons. There's an officer walking with a servant back to his room. This is actually Martin, the 3rd mate, who we've seen before, which leads me to make the guess that the person walking with him is the 3rd mate's steward. Every officer, you know, the captain and all of the mates have a steward on a ship like this. And because they are walking together, and the other man is wearing sort of a dark uniform and is carrying 2 plates of food, I think I'm going to go ahead and posit that this man, who is the individual who is crushed by a loose cannon a bit later, the person who was yelling, "Sir, loose cannon," that this is the 3rd mate's steward. So I'm going to go look in the crew list and see if that makes sense. This unknown soul might be crew member number 31, Roderick Anderson, who's from England. It doesn't indicate that he might have an accent, but you never know. Some people do. You know, even if they're from a place, they have an accent. I'm going to say he was crushed by a loose cannon, because I didn't remember to fill that in when I was there in that page of the book. So that's a hypothesis. We will get that, I guess, confirmed or not as we go forward. We can also go up to the top deck in this scene. A lot of the ship is open to us. I'm not used to this. And off the left side of the ship, it looks like some commotion is happening. There's a crew member standing on the side, looking over. He is shirtless and wearing a turban, as he also is in his portrait. There is somebody holding a lantern a little further down the side of the ship. Not down vertically, farther away from the front. And it looks like somebody is bent over on a table and somebody is checking on them. So this may be the corpse that we're here to investigate. Let's activate the watch and find out. Yes. The man who is lying face down on this table is a death. So let's find out. So we're back in the present. We've been transported back to where we found the artist on the second deck at the front. And we're going to follow this little white smoke cloud back out and up the stairs to the top deck. And it's going to make a little fancy loop-de-loop and come round. And there is that bench, and we now have the fuzzy outline of this body. So let's see what happened here. This is 7 part 1.
Let me on. Over my dead body, you bloody Dane. Huh? How's that?
There's no cause for trouble, boys. Get in the boat.
Thought I'd forget. You killed my brother.
What? That was an accident.
The robes.
It wasn't his fault. I saw the whole thing.
Lies. I shouldn't have waited so long.
No, don't.
And we have quite a scene here. So so one man is standing on that bench and has just taken a club and brained the other man who had been holding a lantern. The man who's been clubbed is falling backwards as the man on the table follows through with his swing. Over the side, there is a man standing on the stairs down to a lifeboat on which another crew member is standing, holding some books, looking on. The man on the stairs has his hand over his head, like gasping in shock, trying to stop the man with the club, apparently. It looks like these three were in an escape attempt trying to get away, and the fourth attempted to go with them. Chapter 7, The Doom, Part 1. Who is this? How did they die? I'm going to look at the transcript here. So the person who died was the one indeed saying, "Let me on." And what? That was an accident. And crucially, he's been called "you bloody Dane" by the man who killed him, as well as "you killed my brother." So the man who died, we can go ahead and look for a Danish crew member. I'm going to guess that there's probably not more than one. I'm going to go ahead and look at the nationalities here. Lots of England. Few from China. There we go, Denmark. Crew member number 49, Lars Linde, a seaman from Denmark. And we know that his fate was being clubbed. We don't know the name of his attacker, so I'm going to go ahead and look back through the list, because we know that the man who kills him has a brother. So we could probably at least narrow it down to a couple of people if we know some brothers. So I'm going to start at the back of the list and look upward for any names that I recognize. Peters, Shirley, O'Hagan, Booth, Brennan, Diom, Syed, Wasim, Akbar, Naples, Peters. There's two Peterses. So crewman number 48, Nathan Peters, and crewman number 60, Samuel Peters, are both seamen from England. So I have no way of knowing... Oh, there's our exit door opening. But I don't know... I mean, I have no way of knowing whether this guy is Nathan or Peter. Sorry. Nathan or Peters. Nathan or Samuel Peters. Although the book is saying that if we were to make an extreme deduction with a level 3 difficulty, we could figure out who this is. But I'm not into that, I guess. Well, not I guess. I'm just not. I don't want to make a level 3 deduction. Because I'm not that smart. So I'll just say Lars Linda was clubbed by an unknown seaman. I can say the rank of the culprit. The other two men here, the other two escapees, we also have no idea who they are. There is the man standing on the stairs is a black man with close-cut hair. He has a scarf around his neck, he has a dark jacket, and he is looking surprised. In the illustration, he is sitting with the crew members in the top sketch playing dice. The other man, who is standing in the lifeboat holding some books, is a very well-dressed white man with dark hair, combed very neatly. He's wearing a dark jacket with broad, light-colored lapels. In the sketch, he is in the bottom sketch watching the execution, and he is standing near the back with some other folks. So, I don't know who those are. And we have an exit from this scene, and I believe an exit from Chapter 7. Oh my gosh. So the book has just concluded Chapter 7 for us. And going back to the first page where all of those clicks were, that was the number of deaths and disappearances. So it has counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 deaths that we know of. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 disappearances. That is, people that the book knows never appear again after this chapter. And we have to determine what happened to them. So I'm going to go through these pages and make sure I've filled in all the information I know. So, Chapter 7, Part 1. Lars Linda is clubbed by an unknown Peter's brother. Part 2. Edward Spratt, the artist, is crushed by a terrible beast while taking a dump off the side. Part 3. An unknown crew member, below deck, is crushed by a loose cannon being wielded by the beast. Whoop. Accidentally closed the book there. While the gunners are attempting to load and shoot the cannons, and the beast reaches in, grabs a cannon, and crushes this man against the wall with it. Part 4, the cannon that was pulled against the wall had already had its fuse lit and goes off within the ship, blowing up 2 men. I'm just changing their fates to shot with a cannon by the beast, because I don't know who lit the fuse. And I don't think it was the fuse lighter's fault. I think it was the beast. We can't identify either of these men, but they are blasted by the beast. Then another cannon, which has been shaken loose by all of this, rolls into the wall, and in Part 5, Roderick Anderson, the steward of the third mate, or so I'm guessing, gets crushed against the wall as the third mate rushes to help. Part 6, we're now above board. 2 crew members have run up with bags of gunpowder. One of them somehow gets pulled into the air by the Kraken and is blasted in the middle of an explosion. And again, we can't identify this person. In this scene also are our tattooed crew member, our crew member with a turban, and a couple of officers who we don't know the names of. I keep closing the book. I'm not great at the controls here. Part 7, elsewhere on the deck, our tattooed crew member gets grabbed by a tentacle and pulled upward into the air, having the top half of his torso ripped apart by the tentacle from his legs. There are 12 other people in this scene. Knife Teeth is here. The Peters brother, who we haven't identified, is here. Ponytail guy is here. The black crew member is here. Peter's brother, black crew member, and the guy holding the books are here because we've seen them in their lifeboat in the distance being thrown into the ocean. So we could probably actually mark these 3 guys as having been tossed into the water. Martin Parrott is here. The third mate has made it above deck. Our 2 officers from the previous scene, as well as a couple others, are here. There is a bald crew member with a scoop neck striped shirt, and another bald crew member are here as well. Can't wait till I have names for these guys, so I can just stop giving them epithets. And in part 8, the last scene of the doom that we have here, Abigail Hoskett Witterell, the wife of the captain, comes out from her quarters, trying to figure out what's going on. She sees third mate Martin Parrott, asks him what's going on, asks him where the captain is, and before she can get back inside answering his admonition, she gets hit in the face with a beam being wielded by the Kraken. Other people in this scene include Knife Teeth is here, Striped Shirt is here, obviously Martin is here, a couple of officers, and 2 other passengers, both women, who are in the scene. They are standing also near the passenger quarters, looking on in horror. And that is the end of part 7. So we don't know what happens after this. Obviously something, the Kraken doesn't just... The attack probably doesn't just end there, so I don't know what goes on after that. And then at the end of this chapter we have disappearances. So people that disappeared during this chapter but didn't get their own page. So we have our turbaned crew member, we have Peter's brother, the black crew member, and the crew member with the books. I shouldn't say the black crew member. There are multiple black people on board the ship, actually. But the one that we've seen. There's a crew member who appears from his portrait to be East Asian. Has a bald head and a tunic type shirt with a v-neck, who disappears in this chapter. There's a man who in the portrait is standing by the helm, who disappears. The crew member who has the striped shirt disappears. And so someday we'll need to go back and identify those people and learn about them. So between this and the end, we only have 2 chapters. We have chapter 8, Bargain, which is the chapter that our benefactor Henry Evans has chosen to withhold from us. He says, "This chapter will remain unknown until you leave the ship and return the book to me. Henry Evans." we can see that there are 5 parts to Bargain that we just won't know. And then there's chapter 9 titled Escape with 6 parts. And then the end, which we've already seen all of. So we're really sort of filling in this book from the back. Even though we only have 3 things confirmed for sure so far, we are getting an interesting sense of at least how this story ends. And as this story ends, so shall this stream. I think I am gonna call it good for tonight. We have finished another chapter of Return of the Obra Dinn. Things are no clearer than they were before. We are gathering up more and more questions. I will be updating my Google spreadsheets, which I have forgotten to plug during this time, but I am keeping a screen reader friendly version of both the crew list and the crew portrait available on Google Sheets, which I will link when these go on YouTube, and can also be accessed by typing !sketch and !crew list in the chat. So I will have those updated with the information we know of tonight, so you can peruse them at your leisure. And I'm going to say good night. This has been Return of the Obra Dinn. Thank you for coming out. I am E, that is CEL10E, on Twitter, on YouTube, and here on Twitch, obviously. I hope you have a good night, and don't let the Kraken bite.